So firstly, we have to ensure that we have a static content in our mission. Like for example, you need to have HTML files and images, and probably if you want to have some CSS and JavaScript, you can have all these combined together in order to host a static website. Okay, so this is only a static website. This is not a dynamic application. So means the application is not going to interact with any backend database, or it's not going to generate any dynamic responses. Whatever static content is there, that will be responded back to the user. So that's the kind of a demonstration that we are going to see right now using the S3 bucket. So let's quickly log in. So I'm just using a multi-factor authentication. Okay, so right now we are on the AWS management console, and we have to get into the S3 service, AWS simple storage service. So in the last week, we saw how to create a bucket and how to provision an object into the bucket. So even an image file or an audio is going to be published into the bucket as an object only. So today we are going to see a host of a static website, a thorough static website. So I'm going to create a bucket quickly. By now you would have practiced on how to create a bucket. So the same way I'm going to do it. So quickly we go ahead and create a bucket. And I'm going to give the bucket name as like this, sundar.org as the bucket name. Okay, bucket name have to be unique, is what we learned in the last session. So keep in mind that your bucket name should be unique, and you can choose your region. Even though it is appearing as a global service, you have to choose your specific region where you want to provision this bucket. So I'm using Northern Virginia, and you can hit next and define a key. So let's say project Sundar, and you can hit next. I guess I gave you a briefing about this block all public access in the previous session itself. So I'm leaving it enabled. I'm not unchecking the checkbox. I'm leaving it as such of whatever settings are in. Default public will not have an access to my static website. Okay, so that's what the configuration says. And let's go ahead and see the review of the bucket creations. So I guess everything seems to be fine, and my sundar.org is also unique. The bucket name doesn't exist, okay, or it's not existing in the global space. It's not only within the Northern Virginia. Throughout globally, no one have utilized this name for their bucket as sundar.org. So I'm just hitting the create bucket, and once the bucket is created, we can provision all our static content into it, and that's going to appear as a static website. So if you notice here, we have this bucket got created, sundar.org, and if you just click onto it, it's an empty bucket. We don't have anything into it. The bucket stays empty. It's a new bucket that we have created. Now what is that we have to do here is we have to provision all our static content. I already have certain static content in my mission, in my local mission. You can see I have an index page, I have an error page, I have a sundar.html page, and I also have certain images which I will add it on to my bucket, so that these HTML files can refer to those particular image objects as well. So these are the content which I'm going to publish into my bucket. So what you have to do now, the very first step is going to the S3, create a new bucket, ensuring your name stays unique, and rest you can leave it with the default settings. You need not make any changes, including the block all public access. You can check it and leave it as such. Once the bucket is created, you step into the bucket, and then you can upload all your static content. So click on upload, and right now I'm going to upload all my HTML pages. Okay, all the 3 HTML pages are going to be added into my bucket. Okay, so upload it, and it'll take some time because it gets converted to the binary and then gets uploaded into the bucket. So you knew what an object contains of. So whatever you push into the bucket goes as an object, right? So object is nothing but a file where the file contains the binary content of that particular element. So we have error HTML, index HTML, and sundar.html. All these are HTML static files, and we have to create a folder, okay, called img, because that's the reference name that I'm using in my HTML file. So you can create a folder called img, and it is also an object to be considered as. Now you can see an image folder exists. Getting into the image directory, you can upload the image that you wanted. So right now I'm just going to upload a unique image of Sundar Pichai. So I'm choosing this image. It's going to get uploaded. So you can see the name of this object is sundarpichai.jpg. This is the key name. Please be noted. This is your key name. If you recall the study we had in the previous session, I was briefing that this file name is considered as your key name. So what an object contains? An object contains a key and a value. The value is nothing but the exact image by itself, which is stored in the form of a binary data as in a file. So we call them as an object at the end, right? So sundar.pichai.jpg is actually the key name. Why I'm stressing again and again here is this is which we are going to use while we are learning the versioning, S3 versioning. Okay, so keep in mind that the sundarpichai.jpg is going to be the key name of the object itself, and the image by itself is the value, and key and value combined with other metadata informations is what we call it as an object, which is going to be pushed into the bucket. So once we upload it into the image directory, so it takes some time to convert them to a binary and then gets uploaded into our image directory, img directory. So if I step into the sundar.org bucket, what you will figure out is the presence of img, the HTML files, everything is there. Now what we have to do is we have to provision this as a static website. We have to host them as a static website. So how are we going to do all these? Till now what we have done on the demonstration is all we have experienced in the last week itself. But now what we are going to see on top of that is provisioning all these content as a static website, hosting it as a static website. So how do we do that? So here you can see that there is a properties. I repeat again, going to the S3, you have the S3 bucket name. You can just click on that bucket and you add all your static elements into it. You create your own directory structures and then you add all your content into it. You go into the properties tab of the bucket, properties tab of the bucket. Going there, you will find there is an option to host these content as a website, static website hosting. Okay, you have this option. Now you can just click on the static website hosting sections, and there you will find the option to enable this as a website hosting. Use this bucket to host a website. You can select that. Okay, I repeat again, once you choose the element of that static website hosting, you have to enable this bucket, the particular bucket what you are in, to be acted as a website hosting element. So once you use this bucket to host a website, it will prompt for two information or two major document information. One is the index, okay, another one is your error document, index document and error document. So you need to furnish the file names of the index.html and your error.html. So both the informations have to be furnished. So by that means, now what happens is we are going to choose the same name, that is index.html. That's what we have in our bucket. and then we are going to give the error page name as error.html. So both the file name have to be provided here, and if it's in specific directory, you have to provide the directory structure as well. Okay, but right now it's on the root directory of your bucket itself, so there is no need for the path references. You can directly mention the file name alone. So you can click on save, and before you save, you notice that there is an endpoint for this website hosting. This is your endpoint, okay, which is created. So if you access this endpoint, you're actually accessing this bucket which hosts your website, and the default page, okay, the default page that will be landed by accessing this endpoint is nothing but your index.html, right? So you can take a copy of this endpoint, okay, and let me capture it in some place secured. Now you can click save. Anytime you can go and access that endpoint, not necessary it's going to be available only once. It will be available. If I click the static website, you will again get the same settings of what you have offered before, and you will be still have an access to that endpoint. Now notice that this bucket hosting is enabled. So for this particular bucket, your bucket hosting, the static website hosting option is enabled. So this bucket is eligible to deliver the static content on your browser as a response. Okay, so we will come to this versioning shortly. This is another option which I will be activating on top of this bucket. But right now what I've done is just activated the static website hosting, index.html and error.html. If in case you have a different file name, you can also provide that. But as a standard, we need to refer the file names as an index.html and error.html. So this is what we have done in the properties section. Okay. Now what we will do is, if I'm using this link, so let's say I go ahead and use this link to access the static site. Okay, since it's been activated, so we need to ensure whether we are able to deliver, we are getting delivered by these index page or not. So that we have to check. So I'm going to use the link which is offered. Immediately you should notice that when I access that link, okay, by default buckets are not having public access. It's private. Okay, all the bucket that you create by default will be a private bucket instance, but it won't have a public access. There is no public access here. That's the reason there is a response while you access the endpoint saying that you're forbidden from accessing this resource. 403 says that you're unauthorized. Okay, your access is denied. This is what we experienced in the last week's session as well. If you people have recalled the recordings, probably you would have seen this kind of a response. Why this occurs? Because we have to enable the public access. I'm accessing this bucket via public internet, right? Right now I'm connected to my home Wi-Fi and I'm trying to access the AWS-S3 API endpoint, but I'm unable to get the response. The reason is I'm not authorized to access this resource because by default all buckets will be of private, but we need to convert them to a public access. That's something which is common in every S3 bucket that you create. You can have your constrained settings over there as well. But right now, let's say this is an error that we have. That's fine. We will go and enable it as a public access. So again, I'm recalling the steps that we used to do. We have done it in the last week's session as well. So what we have to do by now, you can sing along with me. Going to the permissions, we have to set the permission to a public access. The first thing is that. And then we need to enable the bucket policy, right? We have a bucket policy, and in the bucket policy, we have to add on the JSON syntax of all the policy constraints. That's which we are going to do right now quickly. So you can go to the, so in the properties, you have the option to enable the bucket as a static website hosting, and in the permissions tab of the bucket, you have the block public access, which is default, block public access, which is default, and that I left it to the default while I created the bucket. If you remember, in the creation of the bucket step, I didn't disable that option. Okay, the checkbox was intact, enabled, but right now what I'm going to do is, you can use this edit button out here, and you can click on the edit, and there you can uncheck this block all public access. So if in case at the time of creating a bucket, if you haven't unchecked it, later you can go to the permissions section of the bucket and you can uncheck the block all public access. By that way, we are able to grant the public access to that particular bucket. So this is a very crucial step, because usually you are not supposed to give a public access, because it gives more data breaches. Okay, it gives more way to data leaks. So that's the reason that AWS is coming up with a prompt again while you try to enable this option, saying that, are you sure that you want to give a public access? Yes, of course I have to give a public access for that because of different reasons. So I'm saying confirm again, and then hit the confirm button. By that way, see, it's taking its own time to save it, and now it says that your bucket is publicly accessible. But is this alone sufficient? So if I go back and if I refresh this, okay, or reload it, I get the same forbidden error. Why is that we are getting the forbidden error? The reason is we haven't set the policy, okay, the bucket policy that is called as resource policies. Okay, you have identity policies and resource policy. Right now, bucket is considered to be a AWS one of the resource, where the resource need to be protected by different policy constraints. So we have to enable that. This step also we have already done, but anyways, it's good to recall it again. So I go back to the permissions, and here, if you see that, we have a bucket policy option. Okay, step 1 is you have to ensure in the permissions tab, your block public access should be disabled. Okay, you are supposed to disable your block public access permission. And then step number 2 is your bucket policy. So going to the bucket policy, you can go to the bucket policy. You can see right now the policy is empty. There are no policy being defined yet. Okay, when it is private, then completely it is empty. Now you can also notice that there is a presence of ARN ID. Okay, the AWS resource name. Okay, you can just make use of that. I'm just taking a copy of that. This we did in the last time as well. Now you know that we have to go to the policy generator, and going to the policy generator, you can define your policy for a public access, and you'll be there to good to go. So now, while we are setting this for the specific reasons, okay, here select type of a policy that's exclusively for S3 bucket, as we did in the last time, and then effect is allow. Okay, is that you need to allow to that bucket, or that you want to deny it? Okay, so I'm saying allow. Then principal is going to be asterisk. Okay, no specific principal conditions here. So principal is basically that who or which account is eligible to access this. I'm saying it's public. It's the wildcard character that I'm using is asterisk, means all principal are allowed. All principals are allowed to access this bucket, right? So then what type of an action that you can apply on top of the bucket? The bucket is there. What is that I can do? Are you able to have a deletion options, or is that what kind of access you have? Actually, we have to give more specific options. Okay, but I'm leaving it to all actions right now. All action can be done by the public entity, which ideally we should not do it. But for our demonstration purpose, I'm saying you can perform all operations on top of the bucket. And here, if you notice that we have this ARN, Amazon resource name, okay, AWS resource name. The resource name is the unique identity for the particular resource that I've created. What is the resource we created? Sundar.org. The bucket is a resource. So it gives a unique identity for it. While you're defining a policy, you need to inject the identity, and you have to say that all resource under this, all sub resource under this resource are also accessible. That's what that slash asterisk means. Please be noted, right? And okay, this resource file is not valid. Might be, just enter valid URL. Slash star. So what happened here is I was using that label. Okay, this is just a label key, but this is the actual value which you need to inject. ARN:AWS:/S3 and then followed with the bucket. So slash star, and you can add the statement and you are able to generate the policy. It automatically generates a JSON template for you. So we need not sit and write those template explicitly. So that's the advantage of this policy generator. And you can come back to the console, and here you have to drop your generated policy template. Okay, so I guess everything seems to be fine. So with this, we go ahead and set save. By doing so, you notice that we get a notification, a warning saying that the bucket has a public access, which you are not supposed to do. But anyways, I'm saying yes, let's let it be, because I want this to be purposefully accessed by the public. Okay, that is meaning. Great. So that's all we have to do here, right? So properties, going to the properties, set your static website hosting settings, and then go straight into the permissions. Ensure that step 1 is on the block public access have to be disabled, and then as usual you have to go to the bucket policy and define your principal action and resource that you want to access. So with this settings, I guess now let's go ahead and see if we are able to access the static website which I have provisioned on my S3 bucket. So we are getting a forbidden error. So right now I'm not getting the forbidden error. I'm getting the index.jsp page. So this is the index.jsp page which I have designed, and the image which I have loaded in the img directory, that image is referred in that HTML index.html. You can see that this image is a hyperlinked image. Okay, it is a hyperlinked image. So you can click on that image so that it will take you to the sundar.html, and you get the briefing about Sundar Pichai, okay, which I have collected from a Wikipedia. It's just to give you an understanding that your static resource can be navigated, okay, from the index.jsp to any other JSPs. You can have any number of any other index.html to any other HTML pages. I meant to say Java server pages there. Okay. So now in this case, while we are using this static hosting, this can be for a public access. Probably you might be creating your own blog. Okay. You want to make that blog to be a public access. Then obviously you can give a public permission. But from AWS perspective, it's something where they are notifying you that giving a public access means you're giving a bigger leakage for the data. But there are reasons where your data might not be that crucial or that critical. So you can make your complete static website to be hosted, and it can be accessed by the public. Okay, and you can give multiple other settings on the policies. This is very simple settings that what we have learned. Okay, as per the solutions architect associate C02 exam, you have to dwell more in detail about this policy creation. More complex policy sequence can be generated, and at that time you will get to know which IP address can this bucket be accessible for. Okay, from which IP address you can give the permissions to this bucket. To that nano level, you can provide the settings. It's up to you. Okay, but ideally, when it is a blog kind of a static website that you come up with, then obviously you have to provide a public access. You're getting it? So this is what I would like to define it now. So we have completely hosted a public static website on my application. So this is what is all about the public access. And coming to this URL. So here, when I click that, it takes me to the sundar.html page, as you can notice here, right? I'm trying to access some other file. So let's say abc.html. If I send in a request, I'll be redirected to the error page. Sorry, invalid resource request. This happens because I've already provided in my static web hosting with couple of settings. One is all about your index page, the index document. Another one is error document. And if you notice that we already have the error document as well in our bucket. So if you go to the bucket, we already have an error.html. That error.html is what is responded now if in case if you are trying to access the unavailable resource in that bucket. So automatically the redirection can happen. But if in case if you want to access sundar.html directly, then you can access that as well, because it's a static resource, right? So you can provide the typical URL and you will be having the access to that particular elements or the content. So the thing is, if in case the resource is not available, then obviously you will be redirected to the error page. So that's the considerations of the error page or the error.html in your static website hostings. I guess you got an understanding of this completely. Not too much of complications, right? Pretty simple, straightforward. Okay. But the only thing is you're going to pay for what you use. That's all. So how much amount of content that you store, you'll be charged for. So free tier, as I already highlighted, that it is just 5 GB of data which you can persist in S3. Beyond that will be chargeable. Okay, you can stay in that within that threshold limit, and you need not go beyond that. So if you got any questions on this, please let me know. I'll take 1 or 2 minutes of time alone because we are running out of time critically. So we have to move on to the next understanding as well. If in case you have any questions, please raise your questions on the chat box. Yeah, if in case you don't give an error file, then obviously it will throw an resource not found. Okay, 404 error. That's all. If in case you are not interested to provide an error page, then obviously you will land up with 404 error. Difference between all block public access. Yeah, so I guess you should have noticed that I'm not going in detail because we have a separate discussions on the identity policies and ACLs. So at that time we'll be discussing. So I guess you can read this. So block public access, these are if in case you don't want to disable everything, okay, so you can see that block public access to buckets and objects granted through new access control list. So we have to study this first actually. Only then you'll be having the understanding of this. So we have something called access control list. You can activate the access control list and you can check this. So what happens is the block public access will be mapped to the ACL's constraints that you will be creating it. But ACL is not widely used today because we go for identity access and resource access mode of security constraints. So ACLs are not widely used, but still you have that option. Splitted options are provided here. Okay, each and every definition will be for a specific reason. Let's take this example. Block public access to buckets and objects granted through new public bucket or access point policies. So these are custom policies that you will be defining. If I check this, then what happens is whatever policy constraints that we have defined in the access point policies, that will be applicable for the bucket. So you might be giving, as I said, you might be giving constraints for on-premise access. Okay, only an organization who is creating this particular bucket, those set of IP ranges can have an access. That kind of a settings which will be defining in a special ACL rules, and that can be bounded to the bucket. So these are different variations of settings under the block called public access. But overall right now we are not choosing anything because it's ideally 100% public accessibility without having any ACLs list. We'll study that probably later once we get into the IAM, and there we have to study more about the accessibilities of identity and resource access. At the time you'll be getting to know about it. How do we access our site without giving public access? How do we access? You have to enable the authentications. Okay, you need to be a part of the AWS space. You might be another account, AWS another account, or you'll be having the users or groups created within this AWS account. Okay, right now you can see I'm in the development account, so I'm the root user. Okay, so I'll be creating multiple users, right? So those users can access. Those are through authentication only. Okay, that's through API. You will be providing the authentication. But right now we are not getting into that details. But yes, of course, you have the access for the restricted people through the credentials. Authentication credentials are there, and you also have a role-based access over there. Okay, so I guess these are the fundamental thing. But the most important thing that you have to notice here is the next study that we are going to do here is in the properties section. You should have noticed the versioning. Why I'm discussing about the versioning here is the exam, okay, C01 or C02 will cover more on this versioning as well. S3 versioning, which is very much important. Okay, so now if you look at this versioning, which is right now disabled, I haven't enabled the versioning, right? Now, what exactly happens if we are not enabling it? I'll just take you through. Have to see is S3 bucket without versioning. Okay, without versioning, what's going to happen, and then we'll see with versioning what will happen. So the first thing is we have an S3 bucket here, and you have the object to be stored in the bucket. So I have one object, and this object will contain a key. Okay, and this particular key will have a name called sundar.png. Okay, S3 bucket without versioning says that you have an object which you need to persist in the S3 bucket, and here you have the key. This key is going to have a name called sundar.png. That's what I referred there. Actually, sundarpichai.png is the name which will be considered as a key, and the value is nothing but the image by itself. Then we have another object which I'm bringing in, and that object also carries a key, and the key is going to be of the same name called sundar.png. So if you notice that I have two different objects, and one object carries a key, another object also carries a key in it, which is very important when you are storing an object. A key and a value is mandate for an object, but both the key names are same. When you have both the key names as same, okay, while you are putting the particular placing the particular object into the bucket, a put request, okay, you are generating a put request, so your object goes into the particular bucket. Your object goes into the particular bucket. Now what happens is this particular image is getting stored in the object. Now the second image also comes up with the same key name, and if you're using the same put request, now what happens is the previous image is getting replaced with a new image, overriding. Okay, so the existence of the previous image is not there in the bucket. This is without versioning. Please be notable that this is without versioning, I'm saying. So when you have one object placed in the bucket with the name called sundar.png, and if you come up with another object pushed, because there might be multiple users who will be working on this particular bucket. In the real-time scenario, since we are on the development mode, there might be multiple developers, and unfortunately the name should have been changed, but they haven't changed the name and they have pushed it. And this will, what will happen if you are not maintaining the version is it will replace. Okay, so exactly what happens here, your key name, if it is going to be same for the new object also as like an existing object key name, then your object is getting replaced with that new object. The old object goes off and the new object takes place. So in the memory, in the bucket memory, there is only the availability of the new object, but there is no presence of the old object. The old object is completely replaced into the new object. This is what is actually happening in S3 bucket without versioning. Is that clear? So this is something which we need to mandatorily understand in terms of the S3 bucket. Now it is not predefined in the index.html. Okay, I haven't predefined the image in the index.html. if you see the index.html code, this is what I have. You can see I'm referring to img slash the file name. Okay, so it's dynamically pulled from the bucket only, from the root presence of that's the reason I've created the img directory as well in my console. You're getting it? So nothing is hard coded. The image, you cannot push the image directly over there. So it's just image img src. Okay. So now the thing is, yeah, now coming to this image. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is, now see that this versioning is not enabled. If the versioning is not enabled, I have the Sundar Pichai, and if you click this if you access this index.html, you can notice your image is this. So this is the image that we have. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to upload one more object. So go and add file. Now what I'm going to do is, I have version 1. Okay, this is version 1 image. I'm opening it and it gets added, and we are going to upload them. Now please be noted, when I upload, this date time will be updated. Can you see? So the previous image got overridden to the new image. There is no two object in the existence. The key name is not changed automatically. You don't have that option to do that. The S3 bucket doesn't have the option to create alternate name for that object. So it will only replace. Now if you go straight into this, if I refresh, you will see a new image. Yeah, so it's happening. So I guess it would have not been properly cached from the browser. So the recent upload have happened. So let me upload it, the version 1. Okay, so it's working. So it's due to the caching problem. So you can see the image got changed, but you don't have the replica of that images, right? The reason is it's getting overridden. So what we have to do now is, we have to go back to our properties, and here you have to enable this versioning. But please be noted, once the versioning is enabled, okay, once the versioning is enabled, you cannot disable. This is a very important question that comes in S3 in different forms. In SAA exam in different forms. Okay, once you have enabled the versioning, you cannot disable, but you can suspend. Okay, you can suspend. The enabling is like switching on. Okay, suspending is like switching off, but altogether it is not getting removed. It's not disabled. Suspending is different. So what I mean is, from suspending you can come back to enable. Okay, from enable you can come back to suspend, but you can never go to disable. The problem in not disabling is it will keep creating new version of images. So your memory is going to be high. So let's say, for example, 5 GB of image I have stored. One image size is 5 GB. Obviously it won't be. Or let's say I'm storing a movie. Okay, 5 GB of movie. And next time with the same name, I'm storing another 5 GB of movie. If the versioning is enabled, what will happen? It will not replace it. It will create another copy. Okay. And now it becomes 10 GB. So the problem is your size is increased. So you need to pay for that, right? So you need to be very careful while you're playing around with the versioning. So default, it is disabled. Once it is enabled, you cannot disable. I'm stressing again. This is a very important exam question. You cannot disable the versioning once it gets enabled. So I'm enabling it right now and click save. Once if it is enabled, let's go back to the, now you can see that a checkbox comes in and it stays that it says that the versioning is enabled. Now let's go back to the image. Okay, so right now you have this Sundar Pichai. Now what I'm going to do is let's have a quick understanding on the slide. So what exactly happens with versioning? S3 bucket with versioning, same process, but I'm switching on the version. Okay, now you can see I've switched on the version. Once it is switched on, when you store your object into the bucket, okay, it will create a key along with ID. It will create a key along with ID. Before, it never happened. because it will override the existing object. So there is no unique version ID created for that particular image, right, or the object. So if in case I have another object also going to be stored under the same key name, you can see that the image is not overriding. Rather, it creates another copy of that another image with the same key but carrying a different version ID for it. So here it is all about 123 and 123, and there it is all about 456 and 456. So what exactly happened? You have two objects carrying the same key, but you have a different ID. But the question is, which object will be activated? That's another important question that we have. So a flag will be assigned. A flag will get assigned for the recent object that we put into the bucket. The recent object that we put into the bucket is this image, right? This image is put, and there is a flag that is appearing, and that flag will say this image is the current version, and this image becomes your older version. But older version image will also be there in the memory of the bucket. Newer version will be activated, and they will apply a flag, a labeling for that particular image, saying it is a current version. Okay, so once the current version is activated, that image is what will be in the production. Okay, your older image will not be. So you need to go and see what went wrong, or if by mistake you have given the same name, then in that case you have to drop the image, and then you ensure you go back to the previous version, or whatever manipulations from the administrative point of view you have to do it. Okay, now what I'm saying is, if in case you switch on the versioning, this is how the appearance will be. Okay, so when modifying an object, versioning will store multiple objects referring to the same key added with a unique version ID. Okay, if you try to modify an object, let's say delete an object, also will carry the version ID of it separately. So in that case, what we try to understand here is versioning is something very essential when it comes to the S3 bucket. A version ID is allotted for each and every object while you're trying to provide a same key for it. If it's a different key, then we need not worry upon the version ID over there. Okay, of course you will have the version ID, but the challenge is you will not have any challenges of overriding the images. So what if in case I switch off? What I mean by switch off is not disabling. Okay, I'm not disabling it, but I'm just switching off it. So when I switch off, what exactly happens is the ID which you have allotted for these images will go nullified. Okay, ID will be mapped to null. So henceforth, whenever you add an image with the same key, it will override. It will only override, but it will be considered to be a null. So you will not have an access to those keys. So you need to activate them. Once you activate, then it will come back to the specific ID again. So this is how the approach will be. When you switch on, the ID number is allotted. When you switch off, the ID becomes null. Okay, so temporarily you can switch it off, and temporarily you can switch it on. It's up to you, but you cannot disable it completely. Okay, you cannot disable it. That's a very important noticeable point. Okay, so having this simulated understanding, let's go straight into it. Now you can see that I'm going to show you that initially when it was disabled, okay, this is my bucket. If I get into the bucket, you can see there is an additional UI buttons are enabled. This was not there earlier when I didn't enable the versioning. I forgot to notice you people. This will not be enabled. You don't have hide and show options when you have the default settings for the bucket. Post I activated the versioning, I have this option. So it is hidden actually. When I say show, you can see for all the objects, you can see that the latest versions that's referring here are activated. These are the versions which was enabled or added before we enable the versioning. Okay, so please be noted about it. Every object has some unique versioning details. These are meta informations of the versioning. Let's go into the image, and in the image we have the same key, and there is a version available here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload another image. So I guess this time it's referring to which image? Okay, this one. So I'm going for version 2, upload, click on add file, and go to the version 2 and choose this and open and upload it. And now you will see that one more the version of that image is there, but a version ID is allotted. This was before when it was not activated. Okay, that time this image was added as a null. So now you can see the same Sundar Pichai.jpg key is actually referring to two objects. So which one is latest? This one is the latest. See, you can see a label. That's what in the diagram I've shown. The recently added image carrying the same key will be activated as the latest version. Okay, so this will be your older version. So now if you go back and do a refresh, your image will be changed. See, your image got changed, right? So what exactly happened here is your images are not getting overridden. You will carry the same image, the older image, and the newer image will also be mapped to the same key, but it will have a version ID. You can see that there's a version ID. What happens if I delete the whole object? Please be noted, there's a very interesting learning here. So when I go to this bucket, and if I try to get into this image and choose this, okay, Sundar Pichai.jpg. When I select this and if I say an action delete, okay, it's going to be deleted. Now see, it's deleted. If I go and refresh, you will not have any image. The resource will not be available. Just wait for it. Now you can see there is no image. Why there is no image? It's because we have deleted it. We have deleted that particular image, that particular key actually. But actually it is not getting deleted. Okay. When I say show, okay, when I say show, you can see it's still there. It's only hidden. It's only hidden, but it is not deleted. So what happens is a delete marker will be activated. A delete marker will be activated. It's like same as like a rollback marker. A delete marker will be activated, but the images are not deleted. Okay, you can see a new delete marker comes up. This delete marker says that the images are completely hidden. You can undelete it. So by mistakenly, once if it's a version is enabled and by mistakenly you have deleted an object, actually your object is not getting deleted. So meaning is your object is going into the recycle bin. Your object is not there in your desktop, but it's going into the recycle bin. But looking as though that image is not there in that location. Yes, of course it's not there, but somewhere it is getting cached. So a delete marker is activated. If I go back to the bucket and if you get into the IMG, it seems that the object doesn't exist. Yes, of course, but if I deliberately show them, you will see them and the marker is there. How will I undo that? Mistakenly I have deleted. How will I undo that? You have to delete this marker. Select it and delete the marker. By that way, your action will be rollbacked. Okay, I can go and delete the marker. By doing so, you should notice that the status comes to the latest version of that previous image. If I go back to the sundar.org and click the IMG, you will still have that object in place. So by mistakenly, if you have deleted, since we have activated the versioning, if it were not in versioning enabled, then once you have deleted the object, that's all. You cannot revoke it. Okay, the action cannot be revoked. So if I step into this image, if you select this show option, you can see that both the version of the object is in existence. So the question is, how do you make this object to be a latest version? How do you activate this object to be a latest version? Either you have to drop this object or you have to add this object again, this version of object. So let's say I go back to the document and you refresh, you will get the image back. So this is the image that we have added. That is the image that is currently in latest version. So what I do is I go to the upload, okay, add, go to version 1 and choose them and upload, because these are unmutable objects. Objects are unmutable. Means the immutable objects. So So now you can see the latest version is changed, and now the image will also change. But the previous object is still there. Now what you can do, you can select this object and you can delete it. When you select the object with the version ID, I'm selecting it with that version ID option, not the delete marker. If I delete it, then your object will be completely deleted. That particular object is completely gone. That's all. You cannot revoke it. So now you have two objects referring to the same key, okay, but carrying a unique version ID. It is maintained. Okay. Now, if in case I by mistakenly delete the key of the object, your objects will not be deleted. Instead, it will create a delete marker, and then you can undo it if needed. But if you want to delete a specific object thoroughly, then you can go and select that. Okay, right now this is the image that we have. Now what I'm doing is I'm going straight into the object, the version ID enabled object, and select delete. Okay, you can delete it. Now it is gone. The older version now becomes the latest version. If you go back and refresh, you will get the image back. You're getting it? So now, is there a way to revoke that a deleted version ID object? No, you don't. You don't have the option. Okay. So version ID will give you a first level security from not deleting the object mistakenly, or if in case you have another object uploaded with the same key also, will not affect your existing object, but it will create a object with the new version ID carrying the same key name. So this is something very important when it comes to the S3 bucket. So versioning is an important aspect in terms of exam questions as well. So you got to manually use the versioning. So when I say suspend and save it, so I'm suspending it temporarily, but it is not actually the disabled mode. Okay, it's not actually disabled, it's just suspend. This suspends the creation of object versions for all operations, but preserves any existing object. Preserves any existing object. That's more important. The object, whatever was created, there will be existing. Okay, but it's not disabled. If it's getting disabled, what does it mean actually is, even though it seems to be like a disabled status, it is not disabled. Disabled means the object existence will not be there. So if you go back and you can see, you have this version. If I add another object, it will be overloaded because we have done the disabling of the option. I'm sorry, suspending of the version. So the versions are going to be suspended temporarily. Getting it? So the two things that I wanted to give a more stress is, your versioning is must when it comes to the S3. But if you use a versioning, please remember that whenever I upload an object with the same key, two objects are existing in the memory, and the size is calculated for your billing as well. Okay, when you go for billing, the billing will count for that additional image, which is also added with the new version ID. Okay, so in that case, be very careful. This is what is your plan is. So if you look at here, the storage S3 free tier, okay, S3 billing details are there. So you can look at the plan, how much amount will be incurred. So you have to play safe. The data transfer is very important. The data transfer is very much important, because as you can see, data transfer into Amazon S3 from internet, okay, from internet to Amazon S3 is completely zero pricing. Okay, but transfer out, transfer in is 0 per GB. Okay, but transfer out for up to 1 GB per month. Okay, when you transfer out, means you are transferring your bucket object from one bucket to another account's bucket. Okay, then you will be charged when it comes to these slabs. So you have to make a note of these slabs as well, because the questions will be from here also. Billings is another crucial area where the questions will be mostly asked. So have a look at it. This data transfer is very important. You have request and data retrieval. So request and data retrieval is put, copy, post, list, get, select is all the operations that you can perform. And for which operations, what billing pricing is defined here, and what type of a storage is also very important. S3 has a different type of storage. S3 standard, S3 intelligent tiering, S3 standard infrequent access. So there are different style of storage you have in the S3, and you have the operation that you can apply here. What are the operations that we have done right now? Put, and we also done the operation called get. Okay, we have done the put and the get, but if you notice in the free tier, okay, in the free tier, the storage is 5 GB, and 20,000 get requests you can perform and 20,000 put requests you can perform. Anything other than these operations, if you perform, the cost will be incurred in the billing section. So please be very careful. Don't go beyond the operations of a get and a put, and stay within the limit of a 5 GB. These are your free tier for Amazon S3. Okay. If you cross this limit, then obviously you have to pay for it. So please make a note of it. So that's it from my side. I guess it's time up. So if you have any questions, please let me know. What if I suspended versioning and delete image? Can I revoke it? Okay, we can. That questions can be seen lively. So right now, it's only for the upcoming operations. So right now we are on the image, and notice that it's already been suspended. It's already been suspended. And go to the overview, image, delete this. So you still have that hide and show here. Delete the object. Okay, the key which I'm trying to delete. If you go for the show, you still have the delete marker, because these are the versions which you have created with the version ID. Okay, suspension is only for the new object which you are going to upload, but not for the existing, right? So it will create a delete marker. For this image, it's still there. So I go and delete this marker totally. For any new object that you're going to apply, it will not carry a versioning in it. So delete marker I've removed. And if you go back and see in your image, your respective object comes back. Okay. I guess you should have seen that definition there in the properties, in the versioning. This suspends the creation of object versions for all operations, but preserves any existing object version. Any existing object versions is preserved, and it will apply the same rule. But for the newer object which you are going to push into the bucket will not carry the versioning. That is the meaning. Any other question?